ever been struggling to choose a full coverage design to stitch, or you haven't tackled one yet and you're not sure where to even start with choosing one, then I hope this video will give you a few ideas to get you started. Hi there Stitchy friends, I'm Kat from Catkin and Lily, bringing you all the best tips, tricks and tutorials so you can learn more about all things stitchy, grow your stitching skills and get the most joy from your stitching. So today I'm talking about how to choose a large full coverage design. Now, not all large designs are full coverage, and I think a lot of what I discussed today could apply to any large project. And not all full coverage designs are large, but many of them are. I'm not putting any specific definition on what large or big or huge is, because we will all see this slightly differently. So today I'm really focusing in on designs that are both full coverage and at least what I would consider large. When you hear the term full coverage, that means that every single bit of fabric in the design area is stitched. No part of the fabric is visible when the stitching is completed. If the design area was 100 by 100 stitches, then every single square would have a stitch in it, so there would be a total of 10,000 stitches. You can see how quickly that total stitch count racks up when it's a full coverage piece. So because of the size and sheer number of stitches, large full coverage designs tend to be long-term projects that will potentially take years to finish, which means that choosing the design is really important, as you'll likely be putting a lot of time and effort into stitching it. So you do want to enjoy both the stitching of it and the finished piece. But given the enormous number of available designs, that can feel like a lot of pressure to get it right when picking out a design. And I don't want indecision to get the better of you, such that you stay stuck in that analysis paralysis when you could be actually stitching. So I thought it might be helpful for me to talk about what things I consider when picking large full coverage designs. I'm not going to cover the actual process of stitching because that's something for a whole other video. Let's start with some full disclosure. I have only stitched on 2 large full coverage designs. But crucially, I did complete the first one, and I would absolutely have finished the second one, except that it's now a UFO, an unfinished object, for reasons which I'm not going to go into here, but watch this space for more on that. My first full coverage was The Amazing Animal Kingdom by Amy Stewart, that was charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. I chose the regular size, which is 700 by 535 stitches. Which is 374,500 stitches in total. It took me just under 4 years to complete, and although I was stitching a number of other designs of various sizes at the same time, I did work a lot on the full coverage. I'm not going to talk in any more detail about this, as I made a whole video about this project, including a very fun time-lapse of the stitching, which I think you'll enjoy. So I'll link that in a card and in the description. My second full coverage was about half the size, but at the time I started it, my whip count had ballooned somewhat and I wasn't giving it as much time as the first one. So I reckoned it would still have taken me 4 years to complete. Since that second one is no longer in the picture, I'm in the position of wanting to choose a new full coverage. So I thought this was the perfect time to share the things that I would consider when choosing a design. But before that, let's talk about where to look for full coverage designs. There are a few well-known websites that have a selection of full coverage patterns, and I'll leave links to all of these in the description. I've already mentioned Heaven and Earth Designs, otherwise known as HAED, and other popular ones are Paine Free Crafts, Artecy, Tilton Crafts, Charting Creations, Unconventional X-Stitch, the Cross Stitch Studio, and probably many more I don't know about. I will also mention Gecko Rouge, but they do only sell full kits and not just the PDF patterns. You can also find an increasingly large amount of full coverage designs via shops on Etsy, and I'll be touching a little on this again later. Finally, there are many cross-stitch design companies that include full coverage designs in their kit range, such as Dimensions, Luca S and Bothy Threads. Now these don't really fall into the large category, but it might be helpful to you to know that not all full coverage designs have to be enormous. Here's one example. It's a Lucy Pittaway design called Love and Light. It's sold as a kit from Bothy Threads, and it's just 142 by 142 stitches. So that's just over 20,000 stitches. That's still a lot of stitches, but it's not 375,000. But let's get back to focusing on the really big designs. I'm going to share 5 things to consider when choosing a large full coverage design. And yes, I'm going to state the obvious and say that my criteria might not be the same as yours. As always, my intention is to give you some jumping off points to think about to help you make the decision that's right for you. But before we even get to those 5 things, there are 2 very important questions to ask yourself. Firstly, do you just want to work on huge full coverage designs, or do you want to actually finish them? Obviously, there's no right or wrong answer here, but picking a design or designs will likely depend on your answer. If you want to finish them, then it will likely be better to limit the number you have, to be working on just 1 or maybe 2 of these at any one time. If you just love working on them and don't mind if they ever get finished, then fill your boots with as many as you like. And secondly, how much variety do you like with your stitching? Will you get bored if you only have 1 full coverage piece and would prefer more options that you can switch between? And do you also have other whips that you want to work on? Okay, we'll keep all of that in mind as I dive into some more specific criteria. So number 1 is the actual picture. It feels like this has to be the first consideration, and I might be stating the obvious here, but choose something you love. I mean really love. If it's a picture that resonates with you or has special meaning for you or a theme you're really drawn to, then that's perfect. You're going to be stitching it for some time, so you want something that will keep you going back to it. Think about how much fun it will be for you to stitch, because I've seen designs I really love, but I know I would get bored stitching them. I tend to gravitate towards designs that have lots of detail and lots of colour, because I know I'm always going to be excited to pick it up and stitch on it. The big no-nos for me are being pretty much all in one colour and or lots of dark stitching. I'll share some examples, and these are all designs I love, but I don't think I would choose to stitch. These first 3 all have a lot of dark colour or a lot of the same colour. I feel I might just get a little bit bored stitching all of that sky in Luminescent or Butterfly Queen and all the dark colours in Andromeda. Here's another 2, and again it's the sameness of the colour palette throughout that puts me off a little bit. That dinosaur museum is fantastic, but that's a lot of brown. I would be more likely to stick with the pretty colours of Rhiannon, but it does look like a lot of fuzzy background and maybe I would get bored. This is definitely a personal thing, and what puts me off might really be your jam. I suggest taking some time to actually imagine yourself stitching the piece you're thinking about and be honest with yourself about whether you'll enjoy it or not. So choose a design you love and something that will hold your interest as you stitch. The second part to this is that if you're stitching something that you want to finish and put on display, then do make sure it's something that you actually want to put on your wall when it's done. I'm going to recommend the same as I did for stitching it. Spend some time actually visualising the finished piece on display. Check in with whether that makes you excited or not. Again, I've seen images I just love, and I know I'd enjoy stitching, but when I pictured them on my wall, I realised I wasn't so sure about them. It may also be a good idea to check with a partner, if you have one, that they're okay with your choice and having it on display. Lovely husband Dr. Tim was very much a fan of the amazing Animal Kingdom, and I've been involving him in the decision about what design I choose next. Possibly more than he would wish, but I do want him to be excited to watch my progress and to love the finished piece. Number 2 is size, because there's large, there's huge, and then there's huge. I'm talking number of stitches here, not physical size, because that depends on what count of fabric you're using. There are a few things to consider relating to size. The first and very simple fact is that the more stitches there are, the longer it will take you to stitch. Coming back to what I said earlier, If you don't mind whether you ever finish a piece or not and are just enjoying the process, then the time it would take you to finish it is likely not very important to you. But if you do want to finish it, then it's worth thinking about this up front, so you can be realistic about how long it might take you before you get that finish, so you don't get disheartened about how long it's taking. I'm going to do a worked example here using the piece that I stitched, which was 374,500 stitches. I know that I worked a lot on this, pretty much almost daily, and averaged 266 stitches per day. Multiply that by 30 days in each month, and that's just shy of 8,000 stitches per month, which is a lot. To convert that to years, divide the total number of stitches by the number of stitches per day. So 374,500 divided by 266 gives you 3.9 years, which is how long it took me. As I've said, I would not get that many stitches in now. I would say I could commit to maybe 3,000 stitches per month. That's 100 per day. At that rate, that piece would have taken me just over 10 years. So, when looking at the size, be realistic about how much you can actually stitch on it, and do the calculations to see how long it will take you. If it seems longer than you'd like, then perhaps look for a piece with less stitches. The second part to considering size is that it has an impact on the resolution or clarity of the image. The more stitches or pixels a piece has, then the more detail can potentially be packed into it. If you take a really detailed image and then make it only a small number of pixels, it's not going to look very good, like a very blurry photo. And some designs are available in multiple different sizes, which will affect how the finished piece will look. I have a slide here to show you a comparison of the different sizes available for the amazing animal kingdom, and the pictures on here are the mock-ups. They're probably too small to really see the difference, but hopefully you'll get the idea. The middle image is the regular size that I stitched. The mini version is 325 by 248 stitches, a total of 80,600 stitches. When I look closely at the mock-up of this size, so much detail has been lost. A lot of the animals look a little bit blurry, and I don't think I would have been happy with it. At the other end of the scale is the supersize version, which is 999 times 765 stitches, a whopping total of 764,235 stitches. I'm sure this would have looked amazing, but I don't think there's as much of a big jump in detail and clarity compared with going from the mini to the regular. And I don't think I could have committed to that, and I might have got really disheartened with how long it was taking, or worst case, never actually finished it. If you look at it right up close to the one I stitched, then yes, there are maybe some elements on there that don't look amazing because they are only a few pixels across. But for me, this doesn't detract from the overall finished piece, and it looks incredible when it's hanging on the wall. I am a big fan of Amy Stewart designs, and they're all incredibly detailed. Another of my favourites is Once Upon a Fairy Tale, but this has lots of people in it, and although I feel the amazing Animal Kingdom worked at the size that I chose, there are others, like this Once Upon a Fairy Tale one, that I feel would probably be better stitched as the larger version, in order not to lose those tiny details, and have everything be recognisable for what it actually is. So you really have to weigh up the detail versus the time it will take to stitch. Of course, this will vary depending on the design, and ones with less tiny details perhaps don't need to be so large. There's one final consideration to size, and that's cost. A design with more stitches will require more fabric and more thread, which will inevitably be more expensive. Number 3 is number of colours. Now, this might not matter quite as much as you might think, at least not in all cases, and much as with size, there's a balance to be found. More colours means that more shading and detail can be captured. So there is likely a point where, if there's a very low number of colours, then it might be that the finished piece won't look quite as rich and detailed. However, the more colours there are, the more time you could spend in changing colours. And it's also likely that there will be more confetti stitching. So that's where you have areas of the design with a high number of colours in an area, or places where there's only 1 or 2 stitches of lots of different colours. This sort of stitching is really quite time consuming and can be somewhat frustrating. Some designs are available in a regular number of colours, and also in 1 or more alternative versions which use more colours. I am very often blown away by how few colours you need to create incredible shading in full coverage designs. The version of the amazing Animal Kingdom that I stitched was 90 colours, but it seems like more than enough, and I'm very happy with how it looks. It's really vibrant and detailed. You can also get that regular size in a colour expansion version, which uses 125 colours, and a max colours version which uses 238 colours. The super size also has a different number of colour options. Again, I don't think it's always necessary to go for the most colours. It probably depends on the design. Again, I like to click into the mock-ups and compare the look of them to see if I feel that the higher number of colours or higher number of stitches is adding very much or not. And of course, more colours is more cost, right? Well, maybe. It is the same number of stitches. So if you have to buy new skeins for all of the colours, then it will cost more. But if you have some stash that you can use for some of the colours, especially where there aren't many stitches of that colour, then it won't be as much extra as you'd think. Number 4 is level of detail. I feel like we've covered this pretty well in regard to size and colours, and whether a design has more blocks of colour or lots of confetti and colour changes. But there is another point to make here, and it's to do with the quality of the conversion from an image to a cross-stitch pattern. Turning art into cross-stitch patterns that actually look good when stitched is not as simple as chucking the image in software, having it spit a chart out and calling it done. Good cross-stitch charting relies on a lot of editing to make it something that's enjoyable to stitch and does justice to the original artwork. For the websites I've mentioned, the people doing the conversion will usually spend at least some time, and very often quite a lot of time, tweaking the charts to ensure they work well as a cross-stitch and adjusting small details and colours. Where I'm less confident that the conversion is as meticulous is with shops on Etsy. Some of them absolutely will take the time to make a really good conversion, and some of them won't. You won't always know though, and again, I would just spend some time looking at the mock-ups if they have that available. These mock-ups can be really helpful because you're not often going to find that these designs have been fully test stitched in real life. For obvious reasons, it would simply take far too long. And number 5 is licensing. This is a short one to finish up my list of considerations. Where a pattern is based on or directly converted from someone's original artwork, then it should always be properly licensed from them, i.e. the artist has given permission to the cross-stitch charting company to turn that specific piece of artwork into a cross-stitch pattern. It should be easy to find in the product description from whom or where the artwork is licensed from. If this isn't stated, then I would find that rather suspicious and I would steer clear of it. Okay, the elephant in the room, which I haven't even mentioned, is AI. There's a good reason I haven't talked about this, and it's because it is a big topic, so I'd prefer to cover that in a separate video. Okay, I think we're done here, and I hope that's given you some thoughts to help guide you on your decision-making process. But I'm not going to lie, it's still hard. I'll be back very soon with a video to share my short list of designs, so I can put all of this into practice, and it won't be just me. Lovely husband Dr. Tim will be joining me to go through the list of potential designs and share his thoughts too. It's going to be so much fun, and yes, I'm going to reveal which one I've actually chosen and will be stitching at the end of that video. And then over the next few months, I'll also have more videos about full coverage designs to talk about those practical considerations, such as what fabric I'm going to choose, how I'm going to keep it all organised, how I'm stitching it, all that good stuff. So if that sounds fun to you, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single stitch. If you are watching this video in the future, you'll be able to find all of the videos in a playlist called Full Coverage Cross Stitch. And do let me know if you're planning on starting or are already stitching a full coverage. And of course, if there's anything specific that you would like me to cover. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy stitching and bye for now.